Please welcome Steve Clemens, editor-at-large, The National Interest.
In a live form with August Pfluger, who is a representative of in the House of Representatives from Midland, Texas, and he's also a member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and he's a lot of interest, of course, in Midland and energy. But what was interesting to me, and I don't know if I mentioned it, what we're about to see, is his understanding of the mix of energy that one needs. And I was sort of expecting this, very conservative commentary, though, I'm going to, just drill, drill, drill. But 40% of the folks in the Midland, Texas area derive their energy from wind, for instance, and increasingly from solar. So there's a broad mix. And I had a discussion with him. He had wanted to be here. We couldn't do it, so I did a quick 8-minute interview with him in Washington, D.C. So let's listen to Congressman August Pfluger, and then we'll get on with the rest of our program. Thank you. And love you guys.
Hey, greetings, everyone. I'm Steve Clemens. I'm editor-at-large of The National Interest, and we have a great opportunity today to have a conversation with really one of the leading thinkers and doers in Congress when it comes to smart energy policy. And he happens to come from one of the most important districts in America when it comes to energy, and that's Midland, Texas. And we're talking about August Pfluger, who's from Texas, and he's on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. And I've had the pleasure of having conversations with him before. So, August, thanks so much for joining us. Yeah, today we're talking in Dallas, so we're in the right state, different part of your state, on what are the component pieces that are required to make America the superpower it deserves to be when it comes to AI, when it comes to making AI real, and all the elements of it. And one of the key elements of it are data centers, utilities, power, and thinking differently about this. So I'd love to kind of hear how this fits on your radar screen of significance, and what are the missing pieces from your perspective as an energy legislator in providing this new platform in the AI world.
Well, it's great to be with you. What a great discussion, and I think it's appropriate that this is happening in Dallas. It's obviously the Metroplex and quite frankly, all of Texas will play a really important role in hosting these data centers, these AI centers, these any kind of center that requires energy and electricity should look at Texas. We just have the resources. So I would say first and foremost, probably the most important thing, the thing that we are thinking about in Congress is how do we quickly move towards expanding the supply of electricity. I mean, it's just plain and simple. We already see demand increasing past what capacity can really do in many areas. The reason these centers are coming to Texas is because we are resource rich when it comes to the ability to produce electricity. But we want that right mixture. We want it to be reliable. It has to be affordable, or these centers will go other places. Think China. So this is a national security level conversation. We want to compete. We want to host them here. We want that to, be built up in the United States of America. And it comes down to providing affordable, reliable energy. And really, Texas just does it better. So
You and I have talked about the
conversation.
profile of energy. In Midland, I was, so surprised by how many people from your utilities, get wind. They have other options. You're sort of in this, and you're the kind of oil and gas giant. So it's not a one or the other. But when I kind of look at the AI data center package, which is driving, energy need up a lot, I hear that just in a really short period of time, we're going to have to double what we need to do. Doubling anything when America is already a robust energy supplier. So as you kind of look at these mix of energy supplies and sources, and also working with utilities, how do you help the utilities succeed in providing that electrification that we need?
Well, ERCOT does think that we're going to go from 75, 85 gigawatts to 150 in the next 5 years. So yeah, I mean, this is a
Wow.
huge leap in demand. And you're right. You mentioned wind. Okay, well, we know that you need baseload power, and that baseload in the state of Texas primarily comes from natural gas, supplied also by some nuclear. But during the day when these data centers are running, wind does play an important role. And overall, wind is about 25% of the mixture, the composition of supply to the ERCOT grid. But we're going to have to expand all of it. And I think, a lot of this is going to come from expanded natural gas opportunities.
Mm.
But that's where the grid folks that are trying to figure out how to get to residential needs, how to get to the business and manufacturing needs, how to get to the data centers are going to, build this puzzle out. And the truth is, we need every type of electron coming in, but I will advocate right now for natural gas and nuclear kind of as that really
Mm.
strong foundational baseload piece, supplied also and supplemented also by other sources like wind.
I think that another thing we're wrestling with today in the discussions we're having is kind of getting beyond this deterministic thing that, oh, AI is good for everybody. AI is just going to come. I mean, the AI era, I think, is coming, and it has been defined as a major geostrategic point of competition for American power vis-a-vis other powers. But do you think we've done a good enough job explaining why it's so important to Americans and why these big investments in next generation energy in AI makes so much sense and matters to them?
No, I don't. And, I think this is something that we're going to have to, wrap our heads around. But every sector, every industry, every imaginable use, military to, any technology sector to just think about hospitals. And I mean, anything you're doing, farming even, is going to be amplified with AI. So, I hope the government, stays out of the business of telling industry what they're going to do. I hope what the government can do is smartly put left and right boundaries on there so that we still innovate, we can still tell the story about it, and we can lay the groundwork for what industry, private industry, can do, which is to capitalize on innovation, and to use it to help our country. I mean, that's the bottom line is we do need to tell a story, but I think the role in government is limited and just it really provides that foundation with some left and right boundaries that are reasonable, not like what Europe has done.
Look, I mean, we're talking Republicans, we're talking Democrats. This is not a, in my book, a partisan issue, but I want to remind people you are a very powerful Republican in the House. You're chairman of the Republican Policy Committee. And, as I look at and the other people I've known it, you really have this interesting role in helping, to smarten up your caucus, help, kind of help lay out not just an agenda, but, kind of build literacy on a lot of other levels. How big a lift is the AI and power lift for you among your own caucus? Is there an understanding about this already being a vital deal, or do you have to do you need to see more advocacy and education among the people you're working with in Congress?
But great point. The organization that I'm chairman of is 189 Republicans from all over the country, every walk of life, every background, in two parts. Number one, on the energy part, we are educating our colleagues on the need for more energy. That also involves
Mm,
really advocating for permitting reform so that we can build the transmission lines, we can build the
right.
infrastructure that's needed. So that's the first part to then supply the electricity and the energy needs to those data centers. And we've got an expert in the house, a gentleman from California, Jay Obernolte, and he knows AI.
Mm,
He did it his entire career. So it's pretty rare to have a true expert. And I've actually brought him in to educate our members, our
mm.
189 members, and to really push leadership, to push the Speaker of the House to move legislation that allows us to compete with China. And that's what this is all about. We want to compete. We want to be first. We want to, harness the competitive advantage that the United States has, which is innovation. And
Mm.
we're not there yet, but I am using the platform as being chairman of the Republican Study Committee to do just that. We do have some work to do, but we're moving in the right direction.
Let me ask you just finally, Congressman. I always have this view of policy. I try to explain to people outside Washington who don't understand this place that either, progress or consensus or just the way things are going will take us to a place, and I call that kind of political gravity. But if it were easy, you would do this. So the question is, are there hard choices? Could America screw this up? Like I'm very interested in the fact that I'm looked at the power of what might be around the corner with all of this. But I just always wonder, what could we do to screw it up? So I'm just interested in whether you worry about that as well. And are there hard choices that we have to make as a nation or in the state of Texas, to begin understanding the key importance of this industry and make sure that we pave some of the things you talked about? Because there could be choices of people who see it the other way. Could we find ourselves now lagging in the AI race and behind others because of smarter decisions they made?
Well, I was a fighter pilot. I flew the F
Mm,
22. That was my professional career. So the best weapon system ever designed, ever built, in the history of the earth. But it was built on innovation. So let me break it up into the same two categories: AI as a utility and as something we're going to use in every sector, and then energy. I'll start with AI. Yes, we can screw it up. And I
Mm,
alluded to this, but Europe has overregulated AI. They have regulated the innovation out of it so that it's not as useful for hospitals, for the any tech industry, for anything, anybody that wants to use it. They've regulated it too heavily. We can screw it up if we go that direction.
mm,
Secondly, if the federal government doesn't do something, you're going to have 50 different state laws, which is just as chaotic and just as harmful. So we need to have the just right approach at the federal level that lays the
mm,
groundwork for some rules, but isn't too heavy handed. Secondly, on energy, like I'll make a little bit of a partisan dig at the previous administration. They
mm,
were headed down the wrong path on energy because they were picking winners and losers. Just let energy sources compete.
mm,
And that really is our approach right now, is let's unleash American energy. Specifically in my district, that is the oil and gas industry, but it's also wind. It's also in places like the Northwest Pacific, uh, Oregon and Washington. It could be hydropower. So let's unleash American energy in any form that works, that is inexpensive and reliable. And if you pair those two things together, we will win this AI race because we'll have the electricity needed and the innovation required to compete with China. And that's what it's all about.
Well, Congressman August Pfluger, we're doing this in Dallas today. My late mom was from Dallas. I love Dallas. My grandparents are there. So yes, I love Dallas, but I want to do this someday in Midland. So we have to do a deal. We do this conversation live there one day, if you would like to.
That would be great. Love Dallas, love the Metroplex. Tons of innovation going on there. So, hi to everybody, and thanks for letting me join you.
August, thank you so much. We'll see you again soon around this town in DC. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to August Pfluger. I had not realized until I was sitting here watching this how much I detest watching myself. So hope you got through it okay. Let me invite now, we're going to have a string of guests up here in my little show to discuss these issues of energy, AI for real. And let me call to the stage Raul Martinic, the CEO of DataBank. Come join me up here, Raul. Great to see you. Thank you so much. Let's give him a round. Have a seat. So let me just start. I love this topic, but I didn't realize how ignorant I was about some parts of it and also about the epicenter of Dallas. So one of the things I've learned, and which we're going to get into with a number of the speakers, is that if you think about how power in the world used to be seen, it was by who had oil and natural gas wealth. Now it's CPUs and data centers. And if you consider that, Dallas is emerging as truly one of the most phenomenal centers of future power in the entire world. And I did not know that when we planned to do this. And I don't know if all of you know that as well. But when you look at, which we'll get into, is that the data center creation, much of which you're a part of. So am I wrong in that? And I would love to, from your perspective, tell us, what are data centers achieving in this future of AI for real?
Sure. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me. Stepping back, when we talk about data centers, and I'll just talk about US, right? There's about, call it 20 gigawatts of data center capacity installed in the US today, right? And they're everywhere, but they tend to be clustered in a number of kind of key markets that we call core markets.
Right.
The largest data center market in the world, in America, is in the Ashburn area around Washington, D.C. About 5 gigawatts of installed data center capacity.
Because of all
there.
our spies.
Yeah, and, well, it's really where the early internet, if you remember, started in that area. That's kind of where it started in the mid 90s, and kind of people started populating their applications around the early internet on ramps, and that's how it kind of turned into a massive data center cluster. Dallas is probably today about a gigawatt of capacity, but to the previous conversation with the congressman, power is a key enabler to build more data center capacity. Ashburn a couple of years ago had a little bit of a hiccup where they basically didn't have enough transmission capacity coming into that corridor to feed new data centers. And what the industry did is they looked around and said, okay, how are we going to grow from here? And that's what spawned new clusters, as we call them, in markets like Dallas. So for example—
I mean, I just interviewed Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia, and 25% of Virginia's energy use is data centers.
That's correct. Virginia, right now, the Ashburn area is kind of a big mega cluster, but it's spreading south. We're developing a 192 megawatt data center cluster in Culpeper, which is about 50 miles south of Dallas. And then if you go all the way down to Richmond, there's a big data center cluster down there. So Dallas is definitely going to emerge.
And how about Red Oak?
Red Oak is South Dallas.
Okay,
That's where,
good.
yes,
Okay.
that's we're building a 480 megawatt data center campus in South Dallas. What's happened, as folks know about Dallas, it's grown, north. It's getting close to Oklahoma, and people looked at that and said, okay, we want to be closer to the CBD. Why do we want to do that? Because that's where all the fiber connectivity, kind of the connective tissue of the internet comes into Dallas, into buildings that are right in this area. So South Dallas, a lot of farmland, a lot of open area, a very progressive type of environment there. So
I don't mean this in any a negative way, but explain to me why data centers aren't just boxes.
Sure. Well, look, the way I
mean, many of you know the answer to this, but I genuinely don't.
So yeah, this question is a great question. And when I talk to my investors, and a lot of them are kind of generalists, and I try to explain to them what a data center is, what I tell them is a data center is basically the foundation for technology adoption. If you think about anything on your phone, anything on your computer, any digital experience, that digital interaction originates and terminates in a data center. And my view is humans are addicted to technology. So it's really humans' consumption of technology that drives data center demand. We're not building data centers because we're consuming them. We're building them because our customers, who are the hyperscalers, who are Instagram, who are Meta, who are major banks, who are, think again, any application on your phone, Strava or AllTrails, or your Garmin watch, and all the data off that, all that digital information has to be housed in a data center. And this trend has been happening since the mid-90s. I got into this what we call internet infrastructure in the mid-90s.
Because you were a telecom guy, right?
Well, the advent of commercial internet, right? Before the internet, when we were making phone calls, for those of us old enough to remember that, from pay phones, right? The internet emerged in the 90s, and obviously that created all this kind of digital activity, all these digital services, which then results in data centers. So that's kind of what a data center is. I think it runs our world. I mean, the estimate is that data centers globally use, I think, 3% of electricity consumption on a global basis. I'd argue that's a pretty good deal, because the entire world cannot operate without the internet. Imagine the internet shutting off tomorrow. What would we do? And that's using 3% of electric consumption. So now AI has come along, right? AI is just the next technology, right? It is, in our view, as transformative as the internet. In other words, every human endeavor in 10 years will look different, just like it looked different in 1995, right? With the way we communicated, the way we educated
just to
ourselves.
interrupt for a second, in 1999, I was at a think tank in DC, and we got $1 million from a foundation, which is a lot of money then, not so much now, but it was a lot of money in 1999. And we paid fellows to write and work and do focus groups with lawyers, with housekeepers, with people in different industries, to help them conceptualize what broadband would do to their lives. I mean, there was a time where, I mean, it was for me, because I'm older than many of you, it seemed like yesterday, where we were having to kind of conceptualize to people about how transformative this would be. And do you think that's what we're going through right now? We can't even conceptualize.
That's correct. I used to walk around Manhattan and knock on doors and convince people and ask people to buy the internet, and they say, "Nah, I don't need it. I'll send a fax." Right? So I think, this is a technology that, just like adopting internet technology back then,
I wish you had a video of that, but we didn't have smartphones
then.
then.
Exactly. It requires to reimagine everything you do, how you do it, right? It's a new technology. It's going to take, in my view, years for this to be fully absorbed. But
when I talked to August Pfluger, I was talking about, in a pretty short order, the need in a lot of these energy epicenters doubling. But actually, when you look at what's happening in the digital space the next 5-7 years, it may triple, may quadruple. And so the order of magnitude growth of data, the flow of data, all of that driven to create smart cities, smart homes, smarter people, et cetera, is just staggering. And I'm just interested in the innovation demand, because we've got a lot of parts of the equation here today. Are there new ways in which you need to interact with power providers? And we've got Encore here, which is an energy delivery company, one of the largest in the country. You've got other data center folks here. You've got, we have Siemens, of course, which is involved in the technology of creating this. What has to change in that equation to achieve the kind of success we have?
That's a great question. And look, I think we're definitely going through a phase of more rapid adoption of kind of data center infrastructure, right, compared to, let's say, pre-ChatGPT. I would argue, though, that I actually think we're going to be able to manage this adoption, right? And there's a number of factors there. Number one, as the congressman mentioned, the market has responded. There is a lot of, the utilities have decided to, make this a focus. We'll hear from Encore. They're very focused on this. People are responding by bringing new generation to bear, both kind of from a fossil fuel perspective and a renewable perspective. And then on the estimates, I don't know folks who follow this very closely. This year, in the last couple of months, both Microsoft and AWS have kind of put a pause a little bit on their data center development. And that's because, in our view, they got a little too aggressive in the last 2 years, understanding what their capacity ramp was going to look like. And
so you're worried we may end up with too much?
Yeah, and look, that's the lesson of the .com bubble, right? Which is we put a lot of
it's
fiber
also the
into the
railroad
ground.
bubble. Every big infrastructure investment in America had
some type of over excess,
gluts, and then collapses.
But then, interestingly, over the long term, got adopted over time, right? One of my favorite sayings is, people tend to overestimate technology's impact in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. I think AI is in that type of category, and I think it will consume a lot of data center capacity, but I think it will be done over a more measured period, over a longer period of time.
I'm going to go to Judith in a moment. She's my new friend because I want to make sure we've got other diverse voices from the Dallas Regional Chamber, right? Okay. So whatever you want to say or get to in a minute, but you're global, right? DataBank is global?
No.
You're only America? So why? So I'm interested in this because this is a global game, right? So I want to just put this on the map. I go to China, I was just in Tallinn, Estonia, I go to, I haven't been to China lately, by the way, but I used to go there and go to these. This AI race is a geostrategic race for like hardcore gladiatorial battle. And I'm just interested in, America's place on how we are situated, because data centers and where they are situated matter. So does it matter that you're in America? Are you thinking of expanding? What's going to look like the global scene?
So our investor group, Digital Bridge, has a series of a number of companies that operate around the globe. So we have in total among the group of over 300 data centers on 5 continents. So pretty familiar with.
Where are the best ones?
So in the U.S. No, the U.S. definitely is the most progressive from a data center development perspective, and from as the congressman mentioned, from a technology and innovation perspective. In AI, the data center is a foundational piece, but let's make no mistake, the technology and innovation is critical, as evidenced by DeepSeek, right? That innovation around the LLM stack and around the AI stack is really how it's going to be won. The data center is going to facilitate the winners.
So Judith, how big a feature, I look at this as sort of a changing topographical map where power and capacity and AI is going to change the terrain. How big is this on your map with the regional chamber?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we, from the public policy standpoint.
And say hi to everybody so they can see you.
Judith Tankel, sorry, thank you. Vice President of Public Policy at the Dallas Regional Chamber. So from my department's perspective, we're looking at Austin. There's legislators who are trying to respond to AI down there during the session. And in Washington, we see right now trying to put a 10-year ban on states regulating. So do you see kind of a happy medium on regulation and sort of while we're grappling with that? Because I think no regulation, I think probably a lot of people even in the industry might see as bad, but kind of how do you see the happy medium there?
Well, data centers have kind of just got on the map for a lot of different folks. So I think that is reflected in kind of the fragmented nature of the regulation. We follow the regulatory kind of events in Austin and in other states, and there isn't a lot of consistency. Again, I echo the comments of the congressman, which is, let's put our heads together. Let's figure out some reasonable regulation, some reasonable, guardrails, things around development, where development should happen, how it should happen, what is the impact of the data centers to the grid, to the ratepayers, how do we make sure that, there's a good return on that for everyone, things of that nature, right? Believe it or not, there's a SB 6 bill going through Austin right now. It deals with data center emissions. We build these data centers and we back them up with generators, right? Because we have to deliver uninterrupted power to our customers. Believe it or not, people have done studies where if you just look at the peak load, and if you use the generation that's around data centers in the country, and during the peak load, which is about 5 days per year, and you went to generation, you would increase the amount of capacity in the grid by hundreds and hundreds of gigawatts, because it's all about the peak. So, working with kind of, the governments to try to figure out things like that so that we can come up with reasonable ways to balance everything would be fantastic.
Do you hang out with a lot of other data center people?
Dallas has a great, as I call it, the data center mafia.
Are there like data center guy, guy or girl jokes? Are there data centers? What's your best joke as a data center CEO?
I don't know that one. That's I got one. How do you make a small fortune in data centers? Start with a big one.
Ro, why don't you join us right here? Just stay up here on this end. Just move over here in this spot. I want to now call up another friend of mine in the energy infrastructure and data world, Cameron Baker. Please welcome Cameron Baker. He's co-founder and chief development officer of Garrison Data Partners. I have no idea whether these guys are ruthless competitors, but they seem nice and they got along well in the green room. Cameron, so you've heard a little bit of what we're talking, and what I found interesting, and I'm just going to read a little bit. We talk about some of this stuff in a very linear way, like it's so earnest. We want AI to succeed and industries to connect and power to provide and cities to create, a permitting friendly environment to get all of this stuff right and correct so that the equities that you get are very smart. You do a lot of the bank shot stuff, I find, crypto miners, you've got, as I understand, crypto miners, hyperscalers, institutional investors, independent power producers, et cetera, and kind of looking at a lot of different, and I love the fact that we're able with you to talk about energy infrastructure and data infrastructure, because there's a lot of other dimensions that aren't part of that. They're more nonlinear, if you will, right? And so is that what you do? Am I getting it right?
Yeah. Very close. So my company, Garrison Data Partners.
Hold it a little closer.
It doesn't happen very often that I can't be heard.
Okay.
So my company, Garrison Data Partners, what we do is we function as a front office for institutional capital. This is typically sovereign wealth funds internationally. I heard you mention that.
Yeah.
So I've got some insight there. I could
So you got Abu Dhabi and Doha, Qatar, and
Yeah. So what we do is we run out in front of them and we do the land and power acquisition, legislative, regulatory. It takes a village to build one of these data centers. It takes many, many years. And the impacts are enormous. So if I could take a second, give you all just some idea of what we're talking about here. So a gigawatt is roughly $700 million in electricity every year. There are 1,000 megawatts in a gigawatt, and it takes about $20 million to build out 1 megawatt's worth at a facility. So when we're talking about Texas adding 40 or 50 gigawatts of power, these are enormous numbers. These are not small things by any stretch of the imagination. So I just want to express the scale that we're talking about here is mind-numbing. It has completely maxed out the manufacturing capacity for everyone supplying equipment to the grid, generation equipment. Every supplier around the world is tapped for the next 2 or 3 years. It is that significant.
Look, I've got Siemens and our friends at Encore coming on and some others up here, but I'm very interested in the chip industry, in the chip design industry. You had Moore's Law, Gordon Moore, you basically over a period of time, you keep shrinking by half, the size of these chips. Is there a kind of semi-Moore's Law in the power and data side of this, where even though we're talking about large footprints of data centers, that the computing power, because you think about the heat. So I've been fascinated with the innovation, the tech innovation about heat and the density of these systems, the size is shrinking so that the actual geographic scale is shrinking over time. Raul?
Yeah, so there is some economy of scale from a space perspective, right?
Right.
Because as we call it, density, right? A rack is a standard unit in the data center. It's got computer equipment in it, right? 5 years ago, you'd have 5 kW or 5,000 watts in that rack. I was just in New York at our LGA3 data center. We have the new NVIDIA GB200 NVL72s there. It's a single rack, so the same size. It's 130 kW per rack, so 130,000 watts per rack. So there is economy of scale from a footprint perspective, but ultimately there is no economy of scale from a power perspective. You still have to deliver that power to that location, and you have to figure out thermally how to cool that. So we obviously focus on the cooling technologies to make them more efficient so that we make the data center as efficient as possible and make it as cheap as possible and use as little electricity as possible.
So Cameron, I was talking to you a little bit about crypto because I like saying the word because it sounds avant-garde. Yep. But there's part of it, where years ago, and just to be honest with you folks, I was a guy who was a big giant believer in Bitcoin. I bought a bunch of it at $300 and I sold it at $1,500. So I felt like I'd really won. I've been crying every day since. So in any case, when you think about distributed ledgers, you think about blockchain. These are also elements of the coming, data and technology revolution, much of which will also power AI. But when you're in that and you're kind of looking at, ledgers and these various things going on, how big a feature is that in the topography of energy demand?
Well, crypto actually front-ran, this entire AI data center bubble. So our spiel as a company is we got into this back when 10 megawatts was big, and that's when crypto dudes sort of entered the scene and started soaking things up. They made this possible, but their scale was never big enough to have an effect like we're seeing now. The technology, however, and the cooling and the density and all of that, it almost primed the industry from an engineering, from a supplier. It gave the utilities a chance to digest the request for large loads. Most of them in this country haven't had that in 40 years.
Right.
Nobody in living memory at these utilities has built a power plant, sourced a power plant externally, or done any of these large load requests from a client. So now suddenly everybody in the country wants this much power. So every utility in the country now has to attempt to provide it because they're regulated and they've got rules.
And let me just ask you both finally, and then we're going to move to our guest and friend from Siemens, and thank you for coming to my show. We have a fascinating group of people here that if we were to break away from all of you and go to this room, lots of people are engaged in some element of this, and the diversity of players, some very small innovators, some in the small data center, there are consultants, et cetera. I'm interested in whether the component pieces of this equation are talking to each other enough. Is there enough back and forth with energy providers, energy producers, the tech crowd, and Siemens is here and they've got new plants here. But are all of you meeting and coordinating as well as you should, or do you need Widehall to come and host a party every month?
So to my colleague's point here, 2 years ago, data center providers and utilities, we knew each other, but we never interacted. It's only been in the last couple of years that we realize our two worlds are combining. And yes, I think there's the need for more dialogue and collaboration, really around long-term planning, right? Because building a data center today at the scale that we build it, it's a 36-month to 48-month type of project. Building transmission or power plants is a 10-year project, right? So how do we align our roadmaps in a way where you're making investments and we're making investments in a way that's most economical for both of us? And yes, more of that should be done.
Cameron, make it good.
Yeah, so I think if we don't, we're ultimately going to miss a large fraction of the potential that this opportunity presents. The federal and most state regulatory regimes that are going to govern how all of this plays out are not designed for this. They're designed effectively to protect retail and ensure that the lights stay on at people's homes. So our grid, our regulatory environment, our legislators, they're all focused on something that is not helpful to this cause. So if we do not start conversing more, really what we're talking about is lost opportunity. It's going to be projects that should have gone,
And
but
an
did
efficient
not.
opportunity.
Yes, yes.
Well, you guys are welcome back to the show anytime. But Cameron Baker, co-founder and chief development officer of Garrison Data Partners, Raul Martinek, CEO of DataBank, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to invite a friend, but also one of our hosts today. So if you like the tacos and the chit, can give him an extra big round of applause. But John DeBoer, who is the head of the data center, here, join me here, John. Head of data center vertical for North America and Siemens. John, thank you so much for partnering with us to have a smart discussion about this new AI era that's coming, AI for real. And I think one of the reasons we named this is to try to give people who are interested a more tangible understanding of as I talked with August Fu, what are the hard choices? How could we screw it up? What are the prospects and promises? So why don't we start with the prospects and promises that you're involved with, what you're trying to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, thanks everyone here for the time today. I mean, I think,
I would hold a little closer.
A little bit closer here. If we kind of look at the current world that we're in a massive phase of both scaling up and scaling out. And we heard some of that from our previous members here today. In the scaling up side of the world, these data centers are able to do things that were never possible before, and they're growing by leaps and bounds, by 10x, 20x in their size. And in doing so, they're able to bring new value, new applications, new opportunities to not just the large hyperscalers, but throughout our society and our economy. At the same time, what we're seeing, and it's one of the great things in the audience here today, is an incredible scale out that's happening. The data centers are no longer isolated to Virginia and small pockets, but in the US, which is really becoming one of the leaders in data center construction in the world, we're seeing this build out throughout the country. And what it's doing is it's actually creating new jobs, new opportunities, and particularly exciting for us, we're seeing a new ecosystem that's starting to build around the data center community, new thought leadership, new ways that we can bring things together. And to really be at the cradle of that innovation is an exciting moment in time and its own kind of virtuous thing for our economy.
Are there unique things about the US environment, the Texas environment, the Dallas environment that are more fertile for data center seeding and growth than elsewhere in the world?
Yeah, I think one of the fun vantage points we have as Siemens is that we operate in over 150 countries. And so we get this opportunity to kind of see what's best in breed. And in the case of data centers in the US, one of the amazing things has been an encouragement of the construction. Data centers are infrastructure. This is not just a product. This is building buildings. This is actually layering those buildings with energy, with being able to provide them with an ever-evolving series of new and advanced technologies. And you have to create the environment that supports that. And so in doing so in the US, one of the unique things that's happened is, one, I think the encouragement of competition, the limitations of regulation for the purposes of protecting the society, but allowing it to nurture and grow, have been a very unique thing that's happened here. And then just an amazing pipeline of technology enablers that have innovated from the CPU to the GPU and an ever-evolving landscape of compute. And in the Siemens side of the world, we've had an opportunity to follow that and to kind of actually embrace not just what's happening in computers, but to look at the true triangle of what's happening in this market. And when you bring this triangle together of compute, of power, and of cooling, we're finding that the data center infrastructure can build in a way that wasn't possible before.
So let me ask, how many of you, just out of show of hands, see yourself as somehow connected to the industrial AI world in some way? So quite a number. So you know a lot more about this than I do. But if you go outside and you look at this screen outside this giant building, there's this really cool video that gives you a very cartoon, graphic thing of industrial AI. And it kind of shows you what's different. I think Raul and Cameron both were touching on something different that a lot of us personalize, our power needs, our data needs to a very individual level. And I'm glad people are doing that because it gets them connected. But there's another level of connectivity between systems, machines, things talking to each other, where that dimension of scale is just staggeringly large. And I'd just love to give you a chance, John, to tell us about that industrial AI for real picture and how it's so transformative and different for people like me. These folks are all jaded on it, seen it all, done it all. But for me, it's new and very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the first thing I would do to put it in context for all of us is that we tend to throw around these kind of engineering numbers around data centers. We talk about gigawatts of power. But one of the fun ways to think about it is we're actually going to build the power system of New York City 2 or 3 times in the next 5 years. That's actually the transformation we're going through. And so if you picture the ecosystem that's associated with that and all the people that helped to build New York into the world, the city that it is today, that's now what we're starting to replicate around the country day in and day out. And the why then gets to the industrial side of AI. And what we're seeing is that there actually is a much deeper need when we create products, goods, or services to be able to virtualize them first, to be able to take all the amazing engineering and technologies that happen in the country and to be able to do them faster and with tools. I think we would all love it if we had our own little professor that sat on our phone that would be able to help us answer questions that we just never knew the answers to before. And that sort of enablement is allowing each one of us to go faster in the way that we do our jobs, and in turn is helping to make a very virtuous cycle for AI, and particularly in the world of industrial AI.
You know, we did a similar forum with your colleague Barbara Humpton, the CEO of Siemens USA, and we did this in New York, and she was extraordinary. But I asked her a tough question. I said, look, if you go into labor union disputes, if you go look at, average people out there, I interviewed a couple of Hollywood moguls at one point, and, they just come through the Screen Actors Guild. Everybody's worried about the displacement effects of AI. And Barbara said, this is going to expand opportunity. This is going to expand the numbers of it. There will be changes, but there'll be this. But as you kind of talk to your colleagues, do you have a sort of skunk works? That's what Lockheed Martin is, to kind of figure out how to message in a real way both the disruption that AI will bring, but also these new net positives?
Yeah, I don't know if I would describe it as a skunk works, but
I decided
it was a good expression, though. Yeah, I think what we're actually starting to see is just the sheer number of job creation. So just here in Dallas, 2 months ago, we had the opportunity to unveil new factories that we're building for AI and for all just the power portion of these AI data centers. And it's creating thousands of jobs like right here in the Dallas market. And that is a microcosm of what's actually occurring. The other powerful thing that we're seeing is that if you actually wanted to build New York City and you wanted to go do it in the next 2 years, picture how many people you need and what that looks like. And so what's happening is we actually have a need as an industry to pull a lot of that labor back into factories and into buildings, because we just simply can't put enough people out into the market to build the future of AI fast enough with all these AI factories and AI data centers. And so, I think a lot of times it's great to think about it in theory, but it's seeing these real examples where new jobs are being created, where there's new opportunities, and then for each one of us to be able to change how we do our jobs each day and to see how much more enhanced they can be and how it can change the actual efficiency and output. So I don't know if that's really a good skunk works, but that's a little bit of what's happening.
But I mean, right another big question I have, since we're sitting in Dallas-Fort Worth and the Dallas Metroplex area, I'm interested in things they're getting right and things they could get more right, or maybe aren't right yet. What I mean, we're gonna have a couple of people coming up from different dimensions of this equation, but what do you want to see more of as an industry participant here that you're not getting?
Yeah, I think when we start to look at the challenges that are ahead for AI, and one of them is the whole subject of what we're talking about here today, we do see a power problem. The idea of building 3 New York cities, building 35 gigawatts of incremental power, that's actually a pretty big challenge that sits ahead. And we have a environment where we're not just building products, but we're building a whole suite of infrastructure. And so when we dig into that, we do find, and it was one of the questions you asked the previous two colleagues that were up here, that the ability to scale the communication about how you can bring this infrastructure to market, the ability to actually support the build out and not to get lost in the short-term noise and news that we hear on a daily basis, but to keep it purpose-driven and to start to look towards the 2, 3, 4-year forward roadmaps is very important. The other thing is we need to continue to collaborate. And one of the big dimensions that we're seeing there is that this industry is changing on a annual basis completely. And so we're finding that the future of data centers require a continuous need for innovation and creation.
I'm just gonna pick on somebody I want to give it mic to. I like this person here. Yeah.
I am not
Her
in your
husband's a LinkedIn buddy of mine. So I just want to, come in and while we're having a chance with John, and this is Siemens, powerful Siemens here, powering the future. Just get a reaction or question from you.
Well, great.
And
Thank you for calling on
who
me.
you
And
are.
my name is Renee Reed. I live here, and I'm not in this industry. I'm a friend of someone who is. But I am happy you mentioned job creation because I live a little bit south of here, and I was thinking about the Red Oak data center that's coming in, trying to translate in my mind, okay, so how many jobs will that create? Will these needs be met by AI themselves, or will people really be impacted? So I was happy you mentioned that. And just for an example, like, do you have any idea how many people will be employed in Red Oak when that opens?
So can I piggyback on your thing? So do you guys, who was the mayor here before? Mike Rawlings? So I interviewed, is that right? I don't even know if he's popular or not popular, but Mike Rawlings, the former mayor of Dallas. And I helped start City Lab many years ago about best and promising practices in urban management. And I interviewed the mayor and talked to him about what was on his data dashboard, what was on his iPad that he was watching in the city. Turns out he didn't have one. He wasn't like Mike Bloomberg and some of the other data mayors. But by the second time I interviewed Mike, he had a dashboard. And I asked him, what are the things on your dashboard? He says, well, we've got fire, police, all this. But he says, I'm also watching property values in South Dallas. Because he says, I know if property values in South Dallas are rising, I'm doing my job, of getting things. So I want to piggyback on your very interesting question about employment. And I assume that where you're talking about is South Dallas. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so to both my friend's comment here and former Mayor Mike Rawlings, are you creating employment in the southern part of this metroplex?
I think what we're actually seeing is, and it really boils back to the ecosystem effect. So let's picture the world around a data center. First are the pieces that enable it. They're the jobs in the US that are associated with the original architectural layouts and the planning. There's the engineers that build that data center. Those are members of the local community. There are the firms that you're associated with the build out of the data center. There is the equipment manufacturing that Siemens is proud to do right here in the Dallas area. There is then the operations of the data center, and then there's the impact to every single one of us in the room related to the creation and the capability. And so what we're seeing is a multi-factor scale effect around job creation and enablement that is associated with AI and its build out. Now, how many of those are in the south part of Dallas? I guess I'm going to have to.
Well, you're
use
North
some
America.
AI
It's an unfair question, but I do think it's very interesting. We'll get some other people to address that as well. But let me just ask you before I bring my child up, I'm going to ship you over on the couch too in a second. But, I want people to understand a little bit about Siemens, which, you build big machinery, power stuff, but you're also, I think, the powerhouse of a lot of digital twins, digital, software, digital. I don't know if Americans know as much as they do about Siemens Digital and Siemens AI as they do about, Siemens trains.
Yeah. So what I might do is share kind of two parts of Siemens in terms of how we're helping the entire AI revolution that's happening in the US. The first powerful thing is that we have an opportunity as a company to sit at the technology crossroads, and we power all forms of the data center. So from the moment that you have a utility line that's sitting overhead, we build the entire electrical subsystem that's associated with the AI data center. And then we help to actually electrify and build out the entire building and then automate it to make it stronger. And these are just the physical things that you can see.
Right.
But the other dimension that Siemens is very proud of is, we recognize that to do all those things well, that you need a lot of tools. There's a lot of smart people that use a lot of tools along the way. And one of the core focuses of Siemens has been building out the future of digital twins. And what that really is a representation. You can kind of picture it like a model, except that model has all of the knowledge of what actually sits inside that factory built into it, the physics, the capabilities, the domain know-how.
Right.
And by building something in the virtual world, we're able to make the physical world a little bit more efficient. And so as a company, what we're finding is that the combination of these two things, modeling and simulating things in the virtual world, allows us to build better and better machines, buildings, factories, and in this case, data centers in the real world.
Well, cool. Well, you get an A. So John DeBoer, let's give a big round of applause to John DeBoer. Will you stay with us for a few minutes?
Absolutely.
It's okay. I'm going to put you here. Let me invite up to our show Mike Child. Mike, come join us up here. Mike is the Vice President of Product Management of Vivint, which is an NRG company. Good to see you, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, again, we've been talking about industrial scale AI, industrial scale smart systems, all of the innovation that it takes to get this right. But it somehow has to get in the home. It has to connect to real people. And that's where I think you are the essential ingredient. Am I wrong?
No, that's right. Vivint, by the way, so that was right as well. No, it's a super exciting time to be a part of NRG right now. We got acquired at Vivint about 2 years ago. And for those who aren't familiar with Vivint, we are a smart home security company that's nationwide, a little over 2 million customers. Pretty much anywhere you go in the country, you'll find some of our orange signs in front of homes. And so we were acquired about 2 years ago. We were talking to Richard earlier. He got acquired back in 2011, I think, by NRG. So
right.
I'm sure that was also an exciting time, but I think now is even bigger. It's this vertical integration that we now have all the way from the generation side of energy all the way down to in the home, which is what you were alluding to on the consumption side and where people actually engage with the energy and consume the energy. If you look at how people have thought of energy historically and in the past, I think it was largely viewed kind of just in the background. It wasn't so much top of mind, but we're seeing that starting to shift as it becomes a bigger and bigger topic for people. And what we found on the smart home side is that by leveraging things that people already care about within the home, they care about their home, they want to keep their family safe, that creates incredible engagement and incredible stickiness for our customers as well. So at Vivint, we have about 16 or 17 engagements a day with our app experience and about over a 9-year customer life in a high margin service business. We want to take kind of those same insights and apply those to the energy side as well as it becomes more top of mind. That allows us to combine the energy and the smart home side all into one experience. So you take the things that people care about, you take the things they understand.
I love, John's kind of macro, right? Yours kind of macro and you're kind of micro. I mean, it's rare to get micro and macro together because you get the whole picture. But in this space, I think one of the things that's interesting that's often lost is as you think about what does AI achieve and AI do? You're creating an intelligence, you're creating a precision, you're creating exchange of accurate data, real time, and systems that are doing there. And I assume that that's happening at a more modular level in the home with the consumer. And so one of the things I think we're allowed to talk about in Texas is you're going to get greater efficiencies. Efficiencies also mean more sustainability and good use of this power. Is that kind of along the right lines?
No, absolutely. I mean, we are doing it at the micro level. We're doing it at a per home basis.
Right.
And so even back in 2017, we were running algorithms on every single home individually that had its own algorithm running to detect the occupancy level of the house, to know is that home occupied, is it unoccupied? If it is occupied, is the family asleep or are they awake? And if they're out of the house, are they out of the house just for the day or are they out for multiple days, say on vacation?
Okay, so this is a little Orwellian. So your big brother?
We're not Big Brother. But we do. So when we look at energy and really anything in the home, but energy specifically, we have kind of 3 core tenets we want to maintain, which is you don't want to sacrifice comfort. Customers don't want to give up comfort. They want to do it in the most cost-effective way possible, and they don't want to give up control. And so we index very heavily on that last one of not giving up control. We always want to make sure that we are only acting for and on behalf of the customer, optimizing what they want us to be doing. And so, it's funny, I even talked to my parents about this a couple weeks ago. They've had our system for years and years, and this has been running behind the scenes for them. And I started talking about the technology behind it. They're like, wait, what is it doing? Like, how is it doing that? And like, what? So at the end of the day, they care about what it's doing for them and that it's providing them that value. They don't necessarily spend a ton of time thinking about the behind the scenes of what we're actually requiring in the algorithms to make it all possible.
So let me ask you both a question. And I don't know how many people, how many of you would call yourself sensitive to the price of your energy bill? Quite a number, but not everyone. I mean, that means there are some people that are real people in the room. So, but I raise this question because as we become more structurally dependent in so many different ways, I mean, the picture you just painted, both of you at the micro and the macro, enormously energy dependent. We've already talked about the fact that we've got big structural deficits in America. And if you look at the nation politically, I think a lot of what has driven it, I'm bipartisan, but with President Trump's message and success is more energy here, energy superpower, energy this, et cetera. But yet, if you were to look at a structural fear that Americans have, it's over price of energy and about it rising. So do Americans have any anxiety about this greater dependency on all the smart systems you're doing, or are they embracing it strongly? Because the more they get into your tar pit, the more dependent they are in that world. And if you had energy price shocks, it would be there. So it's one of the reasons why I think this is such an important discussion, because one is all the whiz-bang things that come out of this. The other side of it is how do we get the energy supply and delivery right, which we'll get into in a moment. But do you see any anxiety out there in industry, John?
Well, the first thing I would say is I think through any technology transformation, yes, there's anxiety, there's apprehension. If we were to look at, kind of over the last 20 years in power and energy, we were previously nervous about the death spiral of utilities. And we thought that they were all going to go out of business and they weren't going to exist anymore. We were nervous about instantaneous demand response and peak power at the macro level, that there would be these spikes that were unmanageable that wouldn't be solved. And so there's always a component of fear that exists. I think one of the beautiful things that I would say, about Vivint and some of the adjacent technologies is that these are actually the solve fors. And these are the ways that you can automate and react to this market. Right. And it's one of the beautiful things, if we look at the US grid, it is one of the most sophisticated machines that's ever been built in the world. And it has all of these interactions and all this play and all these tie-ins. And with each one of these things that's done, they help to solve some of these really scary macro level problems. So fear, yes. Are there a whole layer of onions and solutions that are coming to actually help solve them? Yes. Both of these things are existing at the same time.
Mike, what are your thoughts about your consumers?
There's definitely concerns from consumers anytime that they're automating anything. You mentioned the word automation, which I think is key there. We look at, a couple different frameworks as we approach it. One is we always want to start by providing awareness. Like we want people to be aware of what's happening. There's a lot of people that don't understand what is actually consuming the energy inside of their home. There's lots of people to talk about as a kid getting yelled at for leaving a single light bulb on in the basement or something. And that's consuming energy, but nothing compared to, what your HVAC is doing at the same time. And so there's a lot of misinformation around there. So there's a layer of awareness, but then customers don't want to
There's some young people in this room. You just got to start turning the lights off. You just got to start. It bothers me big time. Turn off the lights, right? So
still do that. Yeah.
I'm that guy.
Not going to advocate that you don't do it, but starting with awareness. And then it goes into insights, because customers just don't want to have more information thrown at them all the time. They want to know what they can do about it. We don't want to ever give information that doesn't lead to empowerment, that doesn't lead to some kind of an action. And then you get to the third one, which you were mentioning on the automation side. So you go from awareness, insights, and automations. That's when the home can start to actually work on behalf of the consumer and help them optimize what they care about, making sure that they're staying within their price target, they're not getting any kind of bill shock at the end of the month, and that everything that they do is working on their behalf. And that's when I think consumers start to get more comfortable with it. And then just quickly, the second kind of framework we utilize is oftentimes using robotics is these levels of autonomy. And so it starts with ask, then do. And so before you're doing something on a consumer's behalf, you'll ask them about it. You'll say, hey, it looks like you're out of the home right now. Do you want us to change your temperature by 2 degrees to save you energy? You do that a number of times until they get comfortable with that. Then you can go to do, then tell, which is you start to say, hey, we noticed you were out. We turned down your temperature by 2 degrees since you were out. Do you want us to undo it, basically? And then you do that a
John,
number of
do you
times.
have that for big data center plants? You know, if you've stepped out for a while, do you want us to turn it off?
Usually that's not the first preference, but there are a few things like that that are tricky.
And then ultimately you can get to the automation side where you're just doing on behalf of the customer. So it's really building trust over time, which we also view as being absolutely paramount to anything we're doing inside of the home.
Well, listen, Mike, stay with us a few minutes. I'm going to seat you where John is. Give a big round of applause to John DeBoer, Head of Data Center Vertical, North America, Siemens. And John, thank you again for the beer, the wine, the tacos, etc. Really appreciate that. Now let me invite up here Trevin Vaughn. Trevin, come on up here. Trevin is founder of Red Team Investments and CEO of Energy X. And I think this is a perfect pairing because we've gone from the macro to the micro to the middle crow, right? So. And I find it interesting. I mean, you're a new quantity for me here because I'm just like looking at this. And have you ever heard of tiny homes? And have you ever heard of tiny homes? So the folks that are out there really working with veterans and other people in social support, creating. Anybody have a tiny home in their backyard they're renting out as an Airbnb? Oh, there's one right back there. I like to stay in them. So if you have one on Airbnb, let me know. But you kind of do the tiny home version of data centers, right? So tell us about that.
Well, I think, as we got into the market, really.
And is tiny home the right? I mean, am I getting this wrong?
It's fine.
Okay,
I mean, it's a modular data center, right?
Modular data center.
It's effectively
tiny
a very
home sounds
small,
better. Tiny data center.
Yeah, it's effectively a very
better,
small
yeah.
data center. So I think what we found is that as we were entering the market, we really felt like compute was going to grow exponentially, and then that compute was going to need to get closer to the edge to where the use cases were going to be. And for us, our focus is on the enterprise clients. So really, privacy is one of the most important things on the enterprise side. And we're seeing that whether it's manufacturing or it's corporate offices or anything like that, they want to know that is this data going to be in my state? Do I understand the legal risk associated with the AI that I'm running? And can I go out and actually kind of touch and feel it? So I think location does matter. I think it's changing and evolving in ways that we haven't seen.
So it's kind of like what John DeBoer was talking about. It's not density in, it's density out. Like you're spreading it out. And that's what you're a part of?
Yes.
And so when you talk about the legal dimensions of data centers, something that has not come up in any of my conversations, how does Texas different, than say Massachusetts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, imagine if you're a manufacturing company and you're training an AI model and it's doing QA/QC for you in a manufacturing process. And let's just say it was a battery. The battery had a failure in a car, the car burns down, right? So I trained the AI model here, and then there's maybe somebody that's injured or just damage that happened. If I'm building that model in California, what legal risk do I have of storing and operating the data in California versus in a jurisdiction like Texas? We find that enterprises are saying that we do care about where our data is stored and where that model is going to be trained, and they're trying to understand and grapple with the long-term consequences as they really get into AI.
So Mike, you're in Utah, right? So how does Utah measure up?
From my perspective, I think that I haven't seen any specific
do you have any modular centers in Utah?
No, we're domestically here in Texas for now.
Oh, I see.
So we haven't expanded outside of Texas yet.
So Utah, there's still hope for Utah.
Yeah, I think Utah's a great state. They just passed a new law that they're really trying to expand the data center presence up there. But as far as any legislation, I think this is something all states are going to have to look at, is how are they going to set the companies that reside in their state up for success. But I think going back to some of the questions that people have about the efficacy or the fear that they have about job loss, we need to be thinking more as Americans, right? I think our goal should be to win and to win against everyone else globally. So let's move these jobs here let's win the AI race. Let's get all that coming here, and then let the job loss happen internationally.
So this is a big message I've been hearing a lot from people like Alex Wang of Scale AI and others saying, talking Elon Musk and others about how important this race is to win. But also another dimension, I listened to Raul Martinek very carefully about some of the challenges of overinvestment, of creating a glut of capacity. I worry about the same thing in chip industry. They kind of helped Intel to some degree, but we also use taxpayer-supported money to bring in a lot of foreign chip manufacturers in the U.S. May be good for the long-term side. But if there's a glut in the world, it's going to create an interesting set of pressures on your domestic manufacturers if they're not abroad. So I'm interested in this dearth and glut problem. Are you worried about that?
No, I think that people need to look at the use of chips a little bit more specifically. So when a chip first comes out, it's going to be very good for specific uses like large language models and large training runs. Then we can take those chips and we need to be using them with enterprise, and eventually it needs to move to customers. So in my opinion, the most important next step that we need to see is the adoption by enterprise of AI. And so we've seen a lot of consumer adoption. We've seen a lot of investment into like large language models and AI companies, but the enterprise adoption to me has been slow because of concerns, rightly so, about the privacy and the litigation side. Ease of adoption has, I think, been a significant hindrance of CTOs and CIOs to be able to invest the capital, know they're going to get a rate of return on what they're doing, and they can't amateurize or allocate the use of the chips like those of us in the private cloud compute side can, where if they're okay with me containerizing everything, meaning that like if he wants to run a job and it's a container, I can spin it up, it runs for however long, I can spin it down, it's totally private, and I can put somebody else on the server. There's no way that those two things are ever going to interact, right?
So let me ask you, Mike, in this space, to get you both sharing your thoughts on this. When I think about smart homes, and then I migrate that to smart cities, or I think about smart industrial AI, essentially of the industrial AI level of systems that are automating and interacting with each other. These are three different planes of interaction. I'm constantly interested in the question of what gets in the way. What are the speed bumps to a better transition to that? What are the costs of that? So is there something, and I'll just ask you this both because we're going to have our friends at Encore come up here in a moment, but is there something from either a policy perspective, an investment perspective, or a tech innovation requirement that's needed to scale the stuff you do so that it's more successful?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid question, because I feel like that a lot of the risks that we are facing right now, as I'm looking at energy and both within Texas and also nationwide, is just the inefficiencies that can be introduced in the system due to the fragmentation that's there. For instance, it's very challenging to scale some of our smart energy solutions. We can do it in a pocket. We can do it for a single provider. We can do it in a single space. But as you look to try to scale that nationwide or even across just a single state like Texas, it becomes very difficult, and that becomes prohibitive for us in requiring to invest significantly more to get it to that point. And so that to me, if you're talking about like excess or risks along those sides, like that to me is what would do it. It's not because you actually have a misbalance or an imbalance. It's because you're so inefficient in trying to get it from one space to another.
Trevin?
I think that, can you repeat the question one
Well,
time?
I'm really interested in, as you kind of think about these different plateaus, right? And I'm probably misdescribing it, but it's the way I think I'm a graphic guy. So you've got smart homes of, light bulbs talking to, you're walking in the door to your security system to whatever. He's basically the innovator in that space. I think Siemens also is a lot in that. Siemens is also talking a lot about industrial AI. It's why we're here today, to really look at these massive systems that are in the industrial space, begin talking to it, because it changes the dimension. Power data centers are a very key fundamental part of that for the hyperscalers, et cetera. But you also have, I think in the broad area of what I am interested in, because we're in the city of Dallas and smart cities. I've always been interested in how can you make cities smarter, better, faster, meaner, leaner, and better places. Now, I think Dallas is one of them. I think Austin, Texas is one of them. You actually have LEED certified buildings about, smart systems over sustainability. You actually have LEED communities looking at different things. So I'm interested in this question of what gets in the way of the efficiencies you're trying to create. So we're talking, try to purposely bring in different parts of the equation. How do you make it smoother? What gets in the way? What could get in the way of your vision?
I think it comes down to infrastructure design. So we have digital infrastructure, we have physical infrastructure. If either of those are built with rigid systems, then you are not flexible. If you build a digital or a physical system that is modular, then it is very easy to pull out component A and then put in a different electrical component that now has a higher density. There is complexity to that, but if you do the right system design on your infrastructure and you're planning ahead, whether that's digital or physical, you can adapt to an AI or a market that's changing much faster than we've ever seen. And so I think enterprise especially must learn to adopt that approach and implement it so they can see something and actually adapt within a month or 2 months.
Do we have any smart questions out there for Devin? We've got one, Richard Vague. I happen to know him. He used to be a local here just around the corner, but this was not set up. I mean, we're bringing him a mic because we're on being recorded. No, we're got to wait for the microphone. Hold on. Okay, now take it.
I was in Spain a couple of weeks ago when power went out.
That's not on. Can we give people, turn the mics on. There we go. They're not smart mics.
I was in Spain a couple of weeks ago when the power went out in the entire country instantly. Not just Spain, Portugal, and parts of southern France for 10 hours. And people didn't, and we were helpless. Will that happen in the US, and why did it happen in Spain?
Any thoughts on that? Do you know what happened? So
In Spain?
Yeah.
No, I need more details on it.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, from my perspective, when Uri came through, we were very close in Texas to the grid going down, right? So are those things possible here? Yes, and they have happened in the United States in the past, and there's multiple examples of that, and there were lives lost. So running a grid as hard as ours, which Encore is going to talk about, they do an amazing job. It's an incredibly complicated system, and what we need to do as we grow this infrastructure is use the development of AI in these data centers to provide, like when we build a data center, we're putting in backup generation. So there's a way for, I think, data center operators and grid operators to be functioning together to help make the grid more resilient. But there needs to be a lot of a deeper look into how we harden that grid, not just on backup, but also on the logic controllers.
But it's also just shows you the frailty of the whole ecosystem, because I don't know if anybody remember that meltdown in Texas. I was in Dallas right after it happened. I happened to be going to a funeral, which was sad. But I flew into Dallas, and I needed to go an hour east of here. We have alligators, crossing the road and stuff like that, because I saw one first time in my life. And but I couldn't get a rent-a-car. All the rent-a-cars were rented and went out of state. So it's just one of these interesting things where you see the synergies of all these systems if something goes wrong, and how important it is to build resilience in them. Let's give a big round of applause to Trevin Vaughn from Red Team Investments and Energy X, and our friend Mike Child from Vivint. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're getting into the home stretch here, and I'd like to call up Jeffrey Bailey. Jeffrey is Chief of Staff to the CEO, and he's Vice President of Corporate Strategy at Encore Electric Delivery. All of you know Encore. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You're my anchor here.
That's terrible.
And you've heard a lot of different portions of this question about how do we look at this moment. And I just, I put it on the table. I think one of the things I was surprised by that I learned from is that the Dallas is sort of an epicenter of something incredible happening. And I don't think the world knows about it. I said, I did not know about it. And I don't think we even knew about it when we chose to be here. But tell us a little bit about what you think is extraordinary about this moment from data centers and energy, and what's transformative about this particular place.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. I will just tell you, as a utility, very, very quickly, for all those that aren't familiar, I'm with Encore Electric Delivery. We're the largest electric utility in the state of Texas. We're the largest pure play wires company in America. It's our job to build, operate, and maintain the electric grid for about 40% of the state. Texas is a deregulated electric market, so we do not own generation and we do not have retail customers. We're just that midstream component as a transmission and distribution service provider.
Somebody told me you're like FedEx for power.
We're like FedEx for power, FedEx for electrons. That's exactly right. One of the things that I think is important, as you all probably understand far better than we do, data centers in their current form are relatively new for us. data centers, let me just give you a couple of data points. Historically, an average data center for Encore would be 30 to 50 megawatts. If we got a data center that was 100 megawatts, we'd say, man, look how big this thing is. Today, the average data center for Encore is between 700 and 800 megawatts. We have singular facilities, one building, that once their load ramp hits.
So that's a huge jump.
Is a huge jump, and we're talking about just in a 5 to 7 year time frame, really. We have singular facilities that require 1 to 2 gigawatts of power, 1 to 2,000 megawatts of power alone, just for a single facility. Put that into context. The city of Fort Worth has about a peak load of about 3,000 megawatts.
Wow.
So you're talking about a single number of large data centers with the loads of medium to large cities. That is a scale issue that is relatively new, certainly for folks like Encore. Just call it really in the past 2 to 5 years. Many of you have seen these ramps hit for a while. So let me put some other numbers to it. As of Q1, the first quarter of 2025, Encore had 178,000 megawatts of large commercial and industrial load that wanted to connect just to the Encore system. The Encore system peaks at 31,000 megawatts.
So give those again, 31,000 versus what?
178,000 megawatts that want to connect just to the Encore system. Of the 178,000 megawatts, 152,000 megawatts, or 152 gigawatts, are data centers alone.
So you need 600% growth to meet demand.
Well, that is the equivalent of 30.5 million Texas homes. And they want to connect just to the Encore system alone.
Wow.
So there is a significant scale issue that we're dealing with and scaling up accordingly.
So let me just ask you, I mean, I'm just, as I listen to you in the scale, and Cameron Baker up here put numbers to gigawatts and megawatts, and I'd never heard that before, and I'm sure those of you in the industry know about it. But it sounds like an incredible level of capital need.
Incredible.
And so when you kind of begin looking at that scale of investment that's required, is the ecosystem of what we're talking about, AI for real and industrial AI and the companies that are being around it, this new ecosystem which is being created, right? We're building it as we're flying the plane. Is that enough to sustain that level of investment? Are we seeing that level of, because if we are seeing that level of economic growth and investment, it's a big game changer for Dallas, for Texas. I would think.
Yeah, it's huge. Dallas and North Texas, the I-35 corridor in particular, has really become one of the key epicenters for data center and hyperscaler development globally. And there's capital needs accordingly to support that. You're talking about numbers to kind of help clarify some of these things. If any of you are from the DFW Metroplex, if you head down I-45 about 20 minutes, you're going to hit the wonderful city of Wilmer, Texas. Wilmer, Texas is about a population of about 6,000 people. If all of the data center demand that we have right now in Wilmer, Texas was to interconnect to the system, Wilmer, Texas, a population of 6,000 people, would have a peak demand 8 times greater than the city of Austin.
Wow.
So just to kind of help you understand kind of some of the power demand scales that we're dealing with. And so in terms of the capital needs that are required there, so back in 2015, just 10 years ago, Encore had a 5-year capital plan, meaning over 5 years we'll spend this amount of money, of $1.2 billion, which we thought at the time was a robust plan. Recently, just here in the past couple of months, Encore rolled out a new 5-year capital plan of nearly $50 billion, mostly to support the overwhelming large commercial and industrial load that's coming to our service territory. And so, just for example, give you another data point, the first time in the 115, 16-year history of our company that we spent more than $2 billion a year in CapEx was in 2019. In 2025 alone, Encore will spend more than $7.1 billion in capital, building the transmission and distribution system necessary to facilitate all of this growth that's taking place across our service territory and across the state.
So Jeff, I asked this carefully because I don't want to, in a way, position you. I'll ask the same thing of August Pfluger. What could we do to screw this up?
That's a great question. In terms of what we can do to screw this up, and I mean this with all due respect to anyone not from Texas, we can act like other states. I'll give you an example. There are multiple other power markets across this country, I won't name them, that it can take multiple years to site and construct a new transmission line. 5, 6, 7 years. That are markets that are FERC jurisdictional. ERCOT, the Texas electric market, is not FERC jurisdictional. By law, in the state of Texas, the Public Utility Commission of Texas has 6 months to either approve or deny a regulatory permit that allows me to go build a new transmission line.
Really?
6 months. That is a process that can take 5 to 7 years in other parts of the country. So we permit infrastructure faster than anybody else. We construct infrastructure faster than anybody else. You take that, coupled with a relatively lower wholesale price of power in ERCOT as compared to other places in the country, and it's yet another example of why these hyperscalers are coming here right now.
You know, I love how Raul, I'm picking on you, Raul, you know, talked about what data centers do, that they help deliver all of these benefits of technology. They're the home base for like helping to deliver technology to human beings and firms and, you know, society as a whole. And of course, you are also, you know, a fundamental part of that. I am interested in whether the public understands and gets that. You know, I wonder sometimes, do people understand what got us the iPhone, or, you know, what got us the smart fridge, or, you know, the smart washer and dryer, all these various systems that are out there. Are you finding that there's public enthusiasm for this future that we're building?
I think it's growing. I think that enthusiasm is growing. And again, remember, I think in terms of AI deployment, large language models are still, in the grand scheme of things, still relatively new for the average consumer, right? And I think most people are doing a far better job of integrating it into their daily lives now, both at work and at school. And so I think as that integration continues, I think more and more people will understand the benefits. And so I think that's just naturally a good thing for the economy at large.
Jeffrey, you know, you and I have just met, so I have no idea, but I'm a, you know, guy who flies around the world a lot, and so I'm interested in what the bets are that other countries are, you know, what is India doing? What is China doing? What is Brazil doing? And, you know, you kind of look around the world, we're not the only players in the AI race. When you look at other, oh, and I don't know if you do, I mean, you may be looking at other states, but when you look around the world at your competition for data centers and AI and power, is there anybody that does it better than Dallas?
Keep in mind, take this with a grain of salt, I am an absolute homer, so no. But no, but in all seriousness,
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I will say, you know, I don't know if they do it better. I am incredibly concerned as an American from a national security and economic security standpoint that the Chinese and the race for AI is one that I think is equivalent to, you know, the race to the moon with the Soviets, right, in the 60s and 70s. And so I think that is a critical race that this nation must and has to win, and I think we will.
And it's just finally, you know, and first of all, thank you so much for doing this. As we think about, again, data centers and innovators in the energy and power and all the machinery, I mean, you basically listen to John DeBoer, they have all of that infrastructure that are part of this. You know, what I'm interested in, who has to be innovative in that nexus of overlap? Do any of you have to sort of modify how you're interacting? I'm interested in the innovation space because we have some innovators here in the audience. Is there anything you have to do differently to get more with what we've got?
Let me answer it this way, and hopefully it answers your question. I think artificial intelligence, large language models in particular, present incredible opportunities for companies like Encore to innovate for the betterment of our customers, our communities, and our stakeholders. Give you a few examples. We are currently developing a number of AI on-premises models and large language models that can help us do a lot of things better. How can we better, more efficiently, faster, more affordably design, build, and operate the electric system, right? And then if we can do all of those things more efficiently, get assets into service more quickly to serve customers, create economic growth for everyone sitting in this room, and then pass on lower costs to you all to do so, that's in everyone's benefit, right? Can we take things like artificial intelligence and help us better, more proactively through an algorithm route our crews to downed infrastructure or to more construction sites to get customers restored more quickly after an emergency event or a storm, and again, pass on lower costs to do so. Those are the types of things, just a couple of things off the top of my head, where we're using it now to innovate, and that I think in the coming years will benefit everyone in this room.
You're really cool. This is interesting. It's much better than I thought I was going to go.
If I had $1 for every time someone said that, I'd have $1.
So first of all, before we thank Jeffrey Bailey, I first want to. Oh, you had your hand up. What is it a good? Is it a good zinger? Well, okay, let's get him. Let's get Raul. Okay, we'll do a couple here. Raul, let's go to Raul because he was on stage, and then we'll come to this gentleman. But we got to go fast. Oh, Cameron. Okay, Cameron, go ahead.
Hey, no worries. Look left. So, as far as Encore goes, do you guys do you or generally within ERCOT see any structural changes coming with the way large loads are processed? That is either a filter to take out the non-viable, non-capitalized ones, or a fast track.
So we're just going to go with large loads.
Yeah, so
large loads.
That's a terrific question for everyone to understand in this room. As a regulated utility, I have a legal obligation to serve, which means when large loads, when data centers come to try and interconnect to my system, I'm just throwing these names out. Right. Amazon, Skybox, Alphabet, Meta, et cetera. I have a legal obligation to treat them the same as Jeff Bailey Capital. I will tell you, Jeff Bailey Capital, very profitable. But it's a challenge for some of those large-scale developers and hyperscalers with a long track record because I can't dedicate as much time to them as I probably should. There's a number of pieces of legislation in Austin we're working on now that forces large C&I customers to put up more capital requirements. And so I think that will really help shake out what the queue looks like in the months and years ahead.
Raul, quick question. Raul Martinick.
Jeffrey, Cameron, you stole my thunder there. I was just going to, the good news is that 178 gigawatts, I highly suspect 70% of it is what we call fake. It's people that send me emails every week saying, I have 10 spots in Texas, 300 acres apiece, and I've put in a load request with Encore for 1 gigawatt. And each of these, would you like to buy them? So I'm very excited to hear that you guys are looking at legislation that to streamline that a little bit.
Oh, 100%. And I will be the first one to tell you, anyone at Encore will be the first one to tell you, there is no way 152,000 megawatts of data centers are coming to Encore service territory. However, assign whatever probability assumption you want, 10, 20, 30%, and the megawatts that will come just to the Encore system will almost, will be material to the whole state of Texas, right?
Yeah, we'll take a final question
here. We heard Representative Pfluger.
Tell us who you are, by the way.
Caleb Williams. I work in ad tech, advertising tech. But we heard Representative Pfluger mention natural gas and nuclear energy. I haven't heard anyone else expand on nuclear energy. What is Texas doing about that? Because I know China, you mentioned the race there, they're deploying and investing in nuclear. Just curious your thoughts.
Great question. And just for the record, August also talked about wind, but yes.
Correct.
So,
just to take the two in particular, the one takeaway is the state of Texas needs more dispatchable power, period, full stop, right? And I think there's a number of efforts underway in Austin to get that done, the most important of which the Texas Energy Fund. But I will tell you, nuclear power in particular is a big, important thing for Governor Abbott. I think the more we can do to get large nuclear projects permitted and built, it's a wonderful thing. I think small modular reactors, SMRs, are going to be the wave of the future. I think we're probably still realistically 10 to 12 years off before we really kind of see any real large-scale adoption of those or kind of penetration in the market. But it's coming, and it's coming fast.
So before we thank Jeffrey Bailey, I want to thank some other people. John, stand up. John DeBoer. John is buying your drinks and tacos and stuff. And I want to thank Siemens and the entire Siemens team for supporting this series. Thank you so much, John. Also the Widehall team, if you'll please stand up. Our team at Widehall may already be standing. Is anybody left standing? Well, you'll meet him out there. There's Taylor out there in the back, and Haruka have all been running around. And Kara, I want to thank all of you. very much as well. Jake, where's Jake? This is Jake. Jake is with Encore. I just want to take some pressure off him in case you want to say hi to these guys. There are two of them. So Jake used to work, of course, for Secretary of Energy Rick Perry and as a friend. And now I want to give a big round of applause to Jeffrey Bailey, who's head of corporate strategy at Encore Electric Delivery. And I'll just say finally, look, I mean, many of you, some of you I knew, some of you we didn't know. We're trying to take this around, and just because we're moving to other parts of the country, we're trying to have a smart conversation. We'll be posting these things on LinkedIn. I agree with you entirely that this nexus between data centers, energy, technology, and the capacity and demand is so vital for the country. But I think a lot of people don't understand the component pieces of it, which is why we agreed to do this series. And I just want to thank all of you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Have some drinks, hang out a lot, and I look forward to meeting as many of you as I can. Thank you for coming.